sunshine, the drought, the heat. It is one of those things in our lives that from a very early age we realize there is nothing we can do about it. We don't have control. There are a lot of things like that in our lives. There are a lot of storms that come and they go, and we don't have any control. God has control. That's how we understand it. God is in control. And the storms come and they go, and God is still in control. Basically, we can remember to bring an umbrella and a water bottle. We have our little feeble things that we can do, but they help a lot, especially when you're in a desert. You want the water. When it's a rainstorm, you want the umbrella, and they help us have a sense of our role in coping with all of the things that come our way. There are political storms. There are family storms. There are all sorts of things that come into our lives that we just don't know if we're going to be able to cope with. So when we listen to these texts this morning, I want to lift up a few things that we hear. The first thing I want to lift up is that first reading from Jeremiah, because Jeremiah is sort of the icon and symbol of somebody sitting in the middle of a really complicated set of storms. First off, he's a prophet in a city that is about to be besieged, and he's sitting in a country that is chronically getting invaded. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, everybody's coming through and taking what they want. It's kind of like being in a convenience store with a bunch of shoplifters. That's the way his life is like. And he senses that, and he is trying to explain to people who God is. And it's really interesting because what we just hear in this text is not what you would expect to hear who God is, right? If you're talking about the one who's in charge of all the storms, the sovereign God, the Lord of the universe, I think you might maybe go toward like lightning bolts and thunder and a God that shoots down and interferes and interrupts. Or maybe you'd think of a king like Isaiah does, sitting on the throne of heaven with the hem of his garment in the temple. But Jeremiah picks a really weird metaphor, if you ask me, and he doesn't pick it, God picks it. God says, Jeremiah, go to the potter's house and watch the potter. What's the potter doing? The potter is crafting a vessel, and the vessel isn't quite right, so the potter mushes up the clay again and starts crafting it again. I mean, it's an obvious metaphor. There's no ambiguity. Who's the potter? The potter is God, the sovereign king of the universe, but the potter is lovingly creating a vessel, and the vessel has the opportunity to be changed. This potter is not taking that piece of clay and throwing it out and saying, I don't love this clay. The potter is saying, I'm crafting this. And if this pot doesn't shape because of its own choices, if Israel doesn't become the vessel for my glory because it keeps choosing to do other things, it will be reshaped, and it's not going to be pretty. But it's going to happen. The shaping, it's dialogical. Did you notice that there are two places? I'm going to put this down. There are two places in that text where God changes. Did you hear it? That there's this interaction between these measly little people on this measly little piece of land in the middle of the globe. Like, they're little tiny cells in the universe, but God is engaged and cares and is shaping and molding them. Wow. This is a whole different way of thinking of God than God in control of everything and pre-knowing everything like we heard in the psalm. It's somehow breaking open the narrow ways that we think God works and saying, hey, your freedom and the freedom of nature has a component, an element in the way in which the world works. And God is respecting that in God's love. Working to let the glory and wholeness and love of God fill it without simply wiping it out and destroying it. We have seasons in our lives that are so difficult. We have places in our own community that are so difficult. And yet, there we know God is crafting something. So here's the deal about potters. There aren't bad potters, they're just people who want to be potters, right? Either you're a good potter or you're just trying. So the good potters have a commitment to their craft. And there are three things I think it's safe to say that a potter wants. They want a vessel that is functional. Whatever the intention is for that vessel, that's what they want it to be useful, right? And they want it to be beautiful. And they want it to have durability. That's what the whole goal is. For millennia, as potters have been making vessels, that's kind of the qualities that are looked for. We are vessels. God, the potter, is looking for us to participate, to be the vessels that are functional, that do what was intended for us as we were created, to be beautiful, to have the perfection that was intended, the quality of attractiveness and beauty, symmetry, wholeness, and durability. Now, Jeremiah's text is very clearly talking about all the people, right? That is not an individualistic, well, I got to go out and make myself functional and beautiful and durable. It's about all of us together, the nation, the chosen people, us, the people that God loves, all creation and people, becoming more of what was intended. So how do we do that together? How do we discern it? And I think those three qualities are part of it: functionality, durability, and beauty. And as a community, as the church, there's a way in which that marks. Can you see how we could identify that way? That we are fulfilling what we were meant to be as disciples of Jesus. That there's beauty here that's attractive and whole, and that we've lasted, that we continue to last and invest in the future. So, we've been doing a lot as St. Paul's. Given our size and all of the challenges that we have experienced, we're small but mighty, small, feisty, and mighty. That's who we are. And we have been through some amazing storms. Did you know there was a storm, literally a storm, that blew out all the windows in the parish hall about 2 months after they had built it? It had been walls of windows on both sides, and that storm came in and those windows were gone. And so now we have the windows that we have. We've been through those kind of storms, but we've also been through a lot of other storms. Storms that I wasn't here for, you probably weren't here for, but times in which the drought and the difficulties look like they might shut our doors. They might break the community down. But we're not there anymore. I feel like we're in a season of growing, a season where we have clarity about what our mission is and who we can be in this place and in our respective neighborhoods. That we are sensing how much it means to be together in the midst of the times when we couldn't be. And we're sensing that we can be more than just people sitting in the pew or being present in 3D, that we have a community that is wider, that can watch on the live stream, that comes and attends our services throughout the week. We have the equivalent number of people watching our live stream as are attending in the church on average. That's a really interesting and wonderful development. So now I want to invite us to kind of think about how we discern who we become and what will the next thing be. And so I want to invite you to think about what if. And this is just a what if. But what if God might be calling us to leave this building? What if God says, and I don't know if this, I'm such a what if, but what if there were a building, and there is, 6300 Minnesota Avenue. It's 2 or 3 blocks away, and we've worshiped on the lawn. It's for sale. What if God made a way for us to have that building, and we were to move? How would we discern it? How would we know that that was something that God called us to do? I'm not saying God is. Honestly, I am not. I have no agenda, but I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to take those categories that I just gave you about being clay in God's hands and discern as we think about it. I think one thing we would think about is growth. We are growing, but we are by no means growing big enough to fill a church that seats 400 people. We're just not. We're growing in that we have a parking lot that has 9 parking spaces, and it's tough for us to park. But there's a parking lot that's large. We're growing in that we are going to begin to have outdoor services for a while. We can't do it on this lawn. We could do it there. Things like that, as we start to think about this idea, do we feel God's call to it? Could it work? A commercial kitchen, larger spaces to serve people, potential retreat space, potential to do collaborative work with a nonprofit or other churches. Might God call us to do it? Number 1, does it fit the mission that we have? Because Lord forbid that we get distracted by shiny objects and not do what God has called us to do in caring for each other and for our community and get all in a myth about something that really in the long term is not important. Number 2, beauty. Is there beauty in worship in another space? Is there a sense in which God has called us to move from this space, which some time ago, ages ago, we moved here, not us, but our forebears. So is it our time now to think about the next step? Is there beauty in that sense of durability and also in the potential of worship and ministry in larger ways? And is there durability? Friends, I'm putting that on your plate to be praying about. It is not a done deal. There is no agenda, but it is something to pray about and think about. It's a what if that's real enough to bring to us together as community. Do not be anxious, but think about it and pray about it. And we'll talk about it in the future if it becomes more real than it is right now. It's an example. What about in your own life? Where is God molding and moving in your own life? Where you feel a sense that something is happening and you're not sure what, and you have such feeble amounts of control on it. How might you be able to let it go and trust the potter's hand that we are never, ever going to be let go and thrown away? It's all for God's purposes. In those texts that we heard in the New Testament, it is we have these jars of clay because when we are those vessels, nobody gets confused about who the glory belongs to, right? It's God's glory. And we might be small and we might be feisty, but the reality is the best part about us is that we love Jesus and we play together and we pray together and people see God through us. And as long as that's happening, we are being faithful to God. So let's keep walking in that. And we know the storms of life will come. They always do. But we are together in that. And we stand together in the knowledge that God is in the midst of the storm, forming and shaping us. John Lewis, the congressman from Georgia, who was a very integral part of the civil rights movement, wrote in his memoir about being a little kid. And he and his 15 cousins and brothers and sisters were out in the yard when a storm came up. They had a little wooden house. Aunt Seneva had the house, and they were outside playing, and this storm came up, and it came up fast. And all 15 of the kids went into the house, and they were with Aunt Seneva, and they were feeling that wind come up. And it was so strong that as they were standing there, one corner of the house started to lift up. And Aunt Seneva said, "Hold on to each other, and let's get in that corner." And they all went, and they stood in that corner. And the house didn't lift up in that corner. But then the other opposite side, the house started lifting up, and so they all ran together, holding on to each other, and they stood in that corner. And they did this through the whole storm, and the house did not fly away. And he learned in that the power that collectively, we little people who have so little control, collectively we can stand in the wind, and that we will make a difference in this world. So may we be people who allow the potter to shape us, trusting that the things we can't control belong to God, and that God will never leave us or forsake us. And may we discern what it means to be that vessel as St. Paul's and as individuals.